Okay. Alex was our clairvoyant. Um, she was a blind, deaf, and non-sensory infant who was hooked up to all these machines and wires. What is this, Master asked. Alex is our clairvoyant. I fed upon her human mother, not knowing that she was pregnant. And as soon as I realized it, I stopped feeding upon her. But it was too late, and I did everything to save the both of them. But I couldn't save the mother, and Alex was born with special gifts and abilities. She could talk to us through our phones and computers. It was like she was born with the mind of a genius. We were startled at first and not believing when we discovered that it was this deaf, blind, and non-sensory child who was communicating with us through our phones. But soon she had us building devices and quantum computers. She's a clairvoyant, and she's also connected to the mastermind, the sum total of all of our minds, both biological and AI in the world, all at once. And like a quantum computer, she shifts through all of this data in the mastermind. The entire planet is connected to her brain like one big hard drive. She tells us that each individual's mind is like a subroutine operating within the mastermind. At least that is how she sees it. How can she communicate to computers with her mind? Asked Masha. Yes, said Jelly Roll. This lab sits upon a mainframe, and she communicates through that to us. But she's connected to it all. Wireless, a cable. She is bigger than her body. She is bigger than the mainframe that this lab sits upon. Oh yeah. Dracula heard about some plants that the humans were using that provided body parts for the humans, that the humans called suffering succotash. Because of the wailing, almost human sounds that they made, they wailed as if they were in pain and suffering, as if they were so close to consciousness you would think they were alive. So Dracula took these plants into his lab, and he began experimenting, switching in and out genes, and began blurring the line between plant and animal. He was thinking ahead. If humans are wiped out by a vampire horde, leaving behind a planet of vampires, all dependent upon blood oranges, and then blood oranges go extinct, well then, the threat from them would be gone. The problem solved. So Dracula made ready. Once he had given... Whoops, that jumped a little bit. Once he had given them these green-skinned humans a consciousness and made them fully functional, he began experimenting with taste. It took a while for him to get used to drinking indigo-colored blood, but for the most part, it was a satisfying and fully balanced nutritional meal. He experimented until in the dark, a blind taste test, he could not tell the human and the green-skinned human's blood apart. So with a replacement blood for the humans in place, he set his plan into motion, releasing blight, blood orange blight, and he became known as the Famine King. Alex the Flamboyant told that Dracula had told them that Dracula had caused the blight, and he wanted to wipe us all out, vampire and human alike. And the only reason he would do so is if he had somehow developed an alternative food source to human blood. His need for us had ended, and that made him a clear and present threat and danger to all of us, unbound and unchained to his food source. And so now one goal is to track, hunt, and capture Dracula. So humanity and the vampires formed a task force to hunt not a wild animal like a wild tiger, lion, or bear, but like a chess master, ready to sacrifice her own pawns in order to kill Dracula. Alex, the clairvoyant, set her plan in motion, and Marsha was put in charge of it, which meant that she would see less of Jelly Roll, but Jelly Roll would always be in her mind. Suffering Succotash got its name because of the eerie wailing sounds that the plant would make from time to time. Suffering Succotash was a string bean type plant developed by scientists to eliminate the need for human organ transplants. So a person's genes would be spliced into the Suffering Succotash plant, and a vegetable body double of the human, of that person who donated his genes, would be green, from which a new set of organs could be harvested. You would simply cut open the bean pod and remove the unconscious green-skinned human being from it and prepare it for harvesting. It would never know consciousness, for it had no soul. So it was all quite businesslike and proper. They would remove the organs from it and then send it to the compost heap. Where was it? It was all quite legal. Once the transplant was complete, the person would have their life back with their new body parts and a fresh start on life. It was like they were born again. And because a plant has no soul, it was not considered murder. In Miracle of Miracles, it was discovered that if you planted some Suffering Succotash, what people call human beings, in a blood orange grove, that would eliminate the blood from that field. So the threat and danger from the blood orange blight was ended through the use of these Suffering Succotash plants. So all unused human being seeds that had been frozen for later use by people who had long since died for one reason or another, and through accidents and stuff, and so they no longer needed their human beings, were taken by eminent domain and were planted in the blood orange groves of North America, Europe, and Australia to eliminate the blight, and it worked, and life slowly returned to normal. The UN issued a blanket worldwide amnesty for all crimes committed by anyone on either side of the divide, to put this behind us during the blight, so that no one could use the power of the state in order to settle personal beefs and grudges that arose from that time. Of course, there would be settling up for a lot of people couldn't let go of the crimes we committed upon each other during the blight. But that would all be between individuals and not between an individual and the state. It was hardly fair. Humans can't win against a vampire. One worldwide amnesty. No one could against a vampire. It was hardly fair. One-on-one, it was as if they had closed the door to justice. Many humans felt aggrieved. So humans and vampires had to seek out a separate peace. Unfair and bloody, blood for blood, as they say. So many humans tried to capture and kill a vampire. 10 against 1, 20 against 1. The odds were still never in the human's favor. But many humans knew the individual vampire who had killed their loved ones during the blight, and they never let it go. Dracula was a chess master, infinitely patient and cautious. That is how he had survived for as long as he has. Even though these primitives have not been much of a challenge, he knows their every move. Since that day, Dracula woke in a lab, his earliest memory, and then he went on to kill everyone in the lab, and then everyone in the halls and buildings. He was searching as much internally as he was externally for his past. Then as he passed by a window, he discovered that he had extreme sensitivity to ultraviolet rays from sunlight. He had never experienced such pain and suffering like that before in his life, or so he believed, because he had no memory. And he was certain it was from exposure to a yellow sun, which he thought was unnatural. So to counter, even though he didn't have a memory, in his mind, the sun had always been red as blood. He was shocked to see this yellow sun. And he discovered that he needed a full body blood transfusion every night in order to flush the poisons and toxins accumulated over the course of the day from his body. When the next shift arrived at the lab, he fed upon each and every one of them as they arrived to work, and then he opened up the gas lines, filling the building with gas, and once it reached the flame he had left burning in the lab, it triggered a massive explosion that leveled the building. Now he needed to feed, and he already knew that this small sample that there was different types of human blood. He found A-positive blood the most flavorful, and A-negative blood the least flavorful. But for years his thirst was insatiable and his hunger indiscriminate as he tried to recall the memories and events of his life. Eventually he became a connoisseur of blood and blood types, and in all that time he did not age a day. He believed that was because of the yellow sun's effects upon him. Jump back there. And suddenly forced to feed upon humans. Well, that seemed like a small sacrifice indeed in exchange for eternal life. He could use his mind to bend these weak-minded creatures to his will, and most often they gave themselves to him willingly. And the more he fed upon humans, the more his appearance became godlike and beautiful. He never reared children or made new vampires. He was very careful about that. So he was unique in all the world, and that's how he wanted it to stay. Until now, he was determined to eliminate this new half vampire, half human threat by any means necessary. By the time he tracked Jelly Roll down to the hospital in Germany, she was gone, and he has been searching for her ever since, believing that if he could kill her, then all of the vampires she had created would die along with her. He did not know why he believed this, but he did. Alex the Clairvoyant was single-mindedly focused on catching and destroying Dracula. All our concerns were secondary and always possibly counterproductive if they tipped off Dracula to the presence of a superior mind in this chess game of life. So patiently she set up traps and waited. but he had avoided all of them so far, and occasionally she would respond to requests of minor importance, like locating Hillary's family, as a way of distracting herself while her subconscious mind figures out more complex tasks. She knew that she would only get one chance at stopping Dracula, so she had been putting together a series of events that would place Dracula in a place and time certain. And now she needed was for him to show himself. But for some strange reason, it was as if he had vanished off the face of the earth, dead, hibernating, or somehow he had found a new food source. In fact, Dracula had engineered a race of green-skinned humans from the suffering succotash plants, but no longer dependent upon. They lived. Um, and no longer dependent upon humans. They lived in a small. The green-skinned humans lived in a small village that worshipped Dracula as a god, and that lived in a jungle and hid from humans. He had turned his back on the outside world as he worked on a plan to wipe out humanity. The Blight had not worked, so now he was close to introducing Blight 2, and this time he would release it on a global scale simultaneously, so there would not be enough time to figure out a response, a cure, so that the human vampires would not have time to respond. And to do that, he needed to do it through the herbicide that is sprayed on all of the orange groves each spring all around the world. And that is only produced in a ultra-high security plant in the desert. If he were to unlock that security, slip in, infect the herbicide with Blight 2, and then slip out no one the wiser, he would have to not only be chess master, he would also have to be there in person to make the countless split-second recalibrations that the plan required for it to be successful. So Alex the Clairvoyant knew that to destroy Dracula, she would not only have to let him win, succeed in penetrating the herbicide plant and infecting the blood oranges with Blight 2, she would also have to discover where on the planet the replacement food source that he must have developed that has kept him invisible so long dwells. But she could only do that after he was dead, because she knew that she could do nothing to tip her hand. For once Dracula suspected anything out of place, he would burn it all down and then retrench, regroup, and reformulate a new plan. Alex the Clairvoyant observed the world from cyberspace connected to her machines, but she did not change or affect anything in the real world unless there was a reason to do so that furthered the plan or was simply a minor distraction, because she did not want to tip her hand and enlighten Dracula the fact that he was being tracked and hunted by a new opponent. The air vents within the air circulatory system of the plants, the herbicide plants, were filled with little nasties engineered to take out Dracula. When Dracula left the herbicide building, having delivered the Blight 2, he was already dying. He should have crossed the desert in minutes and been in the wind. Instead, it was almost dawn, and he was just barely moving, losing focus, and entering like a state of bewilderment, no longer certain of direction or anything else. Who he was. This, this is impossible, he thought. These primitives could not have bested me. I was their god once. For God's sakes, they worshipped me. He collapsed, dreaming that he could smell blood. And as he closed his eyes to this world, he deep in his mind, he opened deep in his mind, he opened his eyes to paradise. Is this heaven, he wondered to himself. When reports of Blight 2 began to come in and around the world, Alex the clairvoyant knew that her trap had been sprung. So she was free. She was free to go after Dracula with both barrels. In all probability, he was dead, but she couldn't take any chances, and her full focus shifted to finding his blood replacement, where his blood replacement in the world existed. So now the race was on to discover Dracula's food source, believing Dracula dead, before society broke down and panic set in. She realigned her focus, but up until up until now, at this point, she had done everything to avoid letting Dracula know he had an opponent. This was going to be close. Alex knew she was in a race. The replacement blood source had to be found, or all was lost. For Dracula, this was a complete human redial. The green-skinned, his work on the green-skinned humans was a complete human redial. This time he was going to make a bunch of empty-headed, Zen-like sun worshippers who frolicked all day in the sun without a worry in the world and would not oppose him, threaten him, or outgrow him. And this is what he achieved with these green-skinned humans. A new family, a new flock. And by making tiny adjustments upon the original design, he ensured that his children would never outgrow him. His flock of believers who worshipped him as a god would never question, doubt, or turn on him like the humans had. Is that too much to ask? And life was again scented and good, centered around him. The only problem now was wiping out the first humans, the ones that he had originally formed from clay shortly after he had arrived upon this desolate rock called Earth. In that hybrid human vampire, human god, abomination, Jenny Jelly Roll Jones that he had created. He worked tirelessly to destroy her. A spaceship arrived on Earth. Wait a minute, I should probably go to part 3, I guess. Oh, that ain't it. This is it.